In a previous lesson, we had defined certain trig ratios such as sine, cosine, and tangent, and we used a table of trigonometric ratios, like this one here, to figure out what was the sine and cosine and tangent of certain angles. Alright, so in this particular video, we're going to look at using a calculator to find these trig ratios and also talk about appropriate calculator use when it comes to these trigonometry ratios. So first of all, let's look at this example here. Let's say I have a triangle. And let's say this is 42 degrees. This is A, and this is 94. And we want to find the value of A. All right. And so, from our previous lesson, this is pretty straightforward. Here's our 42 degrees. Relative to the 42, A is opposite, 94 is hypotenuse, so that's the sine. So we know that the sine of 42 degrees is the opposite over the hypotenuse. All right, we multiply each side by 94, so A is 94 times the sine of 42 degrees. We then went to our table. Go to 42 degrees, we would look up sine, which is 0.6691. A equaled 94 times 0.6691, and we put it in our calculator and we got to be approximately, let's see here, 94 times 0.6691, 62.8954. What was it again? 62.8954. Great. And that was no problem whatsoever. Okay, well then we come to this problem here. Let's see, I take, oops, that's not a very good right triangle, but that's okay. Let's say this is A, this is 94, and we turn this to 42.7 degrees. And we want to find the value of A. Well, we would do the same thing. We would have the sine of 42.7 degrees is A over 94. We would say A is 94 times the sine of 42.7 degrees. But this time when we go to our table or our ratios, we would go to 42 and 43 and we would notice there's no 42.7. So then the question becomes, well, what do we do? Do we just round up and use 43, which, you know, depending on the situation, that might not be a bad idea. Maybe we could do a little interpolation and get, you know, figure out what is 7/10 the distance from here to here and get that value, which that actually probably wouldn't be that inaccurate. But, you know, with today's technology, we have a better way. Now, and, you know, not a long time ago, before there were calculators that were prevalent, we would actually have these long tables of these trig ratios. And so that's how it was done before the calculator came around. But now that we have the calculator, it does make it easier. And essentially, this calculator has all those trig ratios in there. And so you'll notice here we have a sine, cosine, and tangent right there. And those sine, cosine, and tangent buttons give us the trig ratios. So let's go ahead and put that in. Now before you do that, you do have to make sure you're in what's the right mode. And you might not understand this right away, but if you press mode, you're going to notice down here, I'm going to go down a couple, and right here I have radian and degree. Now later on we'll discuss what a radian is. We'll actually probably do that pretty soon. But for right triangle trigonometry, we use degrees. So I'm going to highlight degrees and hit enter. So I am in degrees. So make sure your calculator is in degrees, or if it's not, then your trig ratios will not work. Okay, so now we can go ahead and do the following. We can take 94 and then multiply that by the sine of 42.7. And that gives us 63. So A is approximately 63.747. And there's our answer. Okay, let's try this one up here. Let's see what comes out here. We have 94 times the sine of 42. And that ends up being 62.898. So you notice when we use a table, of course, there's some round off error. And, so these weren't as accurate as using either a bigger table or a calculator. So there was a little bit of a difference there. All right, now let's look at another example. I'm going to see if I can just put it right in here. And let's say we have this one right here. So here's our right angle. This is 39 degrees. This is x, and this is 37. We want to find the value of x. Excellent. Okay, now I do want to discuss a little bit about appropriate calculator use. And the idea of appropriate calculator use is you don't use your calculator until the very end. So we're going to set up our trig ratio, we're going to solve for x. Once that is all done, then we use the calculator. So kind of keep that in mind. So let's first figure out which trig ratio we want to use. Here is our 39 degrees. And let's see here, this is adjacent, this is opposite. So opposite, adjacent, that's the tangent ratio. So we're going to say the tangent of 39 degrees is the opposite, 37, over the adjacent x. Okay, so there's our setup. Now, don't use your calculator yet. Some students want to say, oh, let me figure out what the tangent of 39 degrees is. Don't do that. Wait to the very end. So let's first solve for x. We'll multiply each side by x. So we get x times the tangent of 39 degrees equals 37, and then we'll divide by the tangent of 39. Okay. Now that we have x solved, now we can go ahead and put it in our calculator. All right, so we're going to end up with 37 divided by the tangent of 39. And we get 45.69. And that would be our answer. Alrighty. Okay, so there you go. Finding trigonometry ratios with your calculator. It is convenient, so we will use it. But just remember, the reason I taught you how to use this this table of trigonometric ratios is because I wanted you to get an understanding of when you push the sine, cosine, and tangent, what is that really giving you? And it's giving you the ratio of sides based on this acute angle in a right triangle.